A very good morning and warm welcome to all the highly esteemed dignitaries of the apex bodies and all the vice chancellors for the session titled Interface with Officers from Apex Bodies. As we all know, the vice chancellors of the universities have several issues which they would like to discuss with the heads of apex bodies face to face. Keeping this in view and to facilitate fulfillment of the spelled out objectives, AIU organizes an interface session with heads of apex bodies in its vice chancellor's meet. Purpose of this session is also to enable the heads of apex bodies to communicate their views and information of their bodies to the vice chancellor. Myself, Ms. Gayatri Dhume, on behalf of Shishu University, feel privileged to welcome and introduce the chairperson for today's session, Colonel Professor G. Thiruvasangam, Vice President AIU and Vice Chancellor, Academy of Maritime Education and Training, deemed to the university. A person of academic and administrative eminence, Colonel G. Thiruvasangam brings with him his dynamic experience of 4 decades. Authoring 18 books, he was also one of 6 vice chancellors of India invited to serve on the Central Advisory Board for Education. In recognition of his academic contributions in the field of higher education, he has received many awards, recognitions, and fellowships of national and international repute. A very warm welcome to you, sir. I would now like to welcome our speakers for today, Dr. Neeraj Saxena. Dr. Neeraj Saxena is serving as advisor 2 in the Policy and Academic Planning Bureau of AICTE. He has served for over 18 years in TIFAC, that's Technology Information Forecasting and Assessment Council, which is India's technology think tank. He has been a member of the team that prepared Technology Vision 2035 for the country. He was deeply involved in preparing a roadmap for education as part of Vision 2035 exercise and has also piloted the activities of Mission Reach, a major initiative to reorient the higher science and technical education and make it relevant to industry. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Introducing the second speaker of the session, Dr. Jagannath Patil, Advisor NAC. Internationally recognized insurance professional, Dr. Jagannath Patil is the former president of Asia Pacific Quality Network. Besides being the first Indian to head APQN, he was also the first Asian expert elected as president of Global Quality Network INQAAHE in 2015-2016. With a long tenure in NAC, Dr. Patil was the convener of the core working group which designed revised accreditation framework and also the convener of core committee to implement the revised accreditation framework of the NAC India. A very warm welcome to you, sir. I now request the chairperson for today's session, Colonel Professor G. Thiruvasangam, to kindly take the session forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gayatri, for your nice words of introduction. Namaskaram, Vanakkam, and pranam to all the dignitaries and the participating vice chancellors. Revered and most respected President of Association of Indian Universities, Professor Dr. Tej Pratap, most respected and beloved Secretary General of Association of Indian Universities, Professor Dr. Pankaj Mittal, Honorable Vice Chancellor of the Sri Sri University, Dr. Ajay Kumar Singh, respected Governing Council members of the AAU, and Honorable participating Vice Chancellors. Firstly, I would like to join with you all conveying our sincere thanks to Association of Indian Universities and the host university, Sri Sri University, for having allotted 75 minutes exclusively for the session of interface with the officials of both AICT and NAC. As correctly observed by Ms. Gayatri, we Vice Chancellors of universities, almost 1,008 in number in India, having many issues, and we don't have apt platform to place our issues or difficulties with the various apex bodies, starting from Universities Grants Commission, continued by AICTE, NAC, Medical Council of India, National Educational Council, etc., etc. Now, it's a golden opportunity given to all the Vice Chancellors to have interaction with my panel members who are extremely, really exemplary, personalities in their own field. Dr. Naveen Saxena, advisor AICTE, and Dr. Jagannath Patel, advisor NAC. Equally, I'm happy Dr. Pankaj Mittal selected or chosen two eminent, academically exemplary professors and advisors of AICTE and NAC, Dr. Neeraj Saxena and Dr. Jagannath Patel. I welcome both of you, sir, on behalf of the session and on behalf of the conference. Friends, even Vice Chancellors, whenever we write to the apex bodies, and few of our queries alone are being addressed. Rest of the queries, we have been waiting for a long time to have interaction with the top officials of these apex bodies or the middle level officials of the apex bodies. But number is huge. If at all, even you are prepared to spare time, it's not possible for you to give apt solution or guidelines. So we Vice Chancellor would like to make this opportunity to get things clarified and get your, of course, guidelines as well. Now, the session is planned in such a way. As a chairman of the session, I may take 5 to 7 minutes. I'm requesting our panelists, each one can take at least 15 to 17 minutes. So they will go for almost 35 minutes. And hopefully, we will be spending much time with the participating Vice Chancellors who are large in number, almost around 100. They will be taking 40 minutes. If at all time permits, I will give my concluding session at the end of this program as well. Now, as an opening remark of this session, I would like to put my comments. The theme of the conference mainly focuses towards the promotion of research and internalization. As Vice Chancellors, as an Indian, as Indians, we can be very proud about your success and achievement in both the grounds of research and internalization of our higher education as well. As you are well aware that the indicators meant for economic of a country is GDP and of course inflation as well. When you think about indicator of success of research, of course we tell number of publications, number of patents, and other parameters as well. But what is relevant today, as correctly observed by my President Tej Pratap, there must be some relevance between the research outcome and the community at large. That is the need of the hour as well. When it's the case, how far we are successful in fulfilling the requirement of the society, ultimately the human being of the universe as well. I can very well give an example. This one is very latest and brought credit to the country as well. As you are well aware that the entire world has been suffering, and even today we don't find the full-fledged solution for a global problem that is nothing but COVID-19. And it's a question of survival for all of us in the world. And we are lucky enough that the Indian scientists, okay, they have given hope for all of us. And whatever we have been talking for the last several decades about the contribution from the laboratories to the land, the concept of lab to land now has been proved in the form of discovering, inventing, and supplying vaccine for COVID-19. See, basically, the Indians, our scientists, they are very much successful in giving our indigenous vaccine to the people who are suffering, not only India, but also in other parts of country as well. As mentioned by a previous speaker, there are 14 countries to whom we have sent our vaccines. And as per today's report, 24 countries are in queue to get our reports. Now you see, we are far behind as far as number of publication is concerned. We are far behind number of patents published and examined is concerned when compared with other developed and superpower countries. But we are not far behind as far as inventing new things and giving solution to the community, not only the community of India, but also the community globally as well. It is an apt example. So we have to pass on this credit to whom? Now this National Education Policy 2020, it came very recently. That too at the time of started suffering the COVID-19 as well. But we had two new educational policies earlier in the year of 1986 and 1968 as well. Moreover, our country and especially education system faced 12 5-year plan also. All because of all these good efforts, guidelines, notifications, reforms they have given to us, we were able to succeed in many aspects, especially in the research area also. At the same time, we have to admit our failures, our deficiencies, inadequacies as far as contributing as the expectation of the policymakers and the rulers of the country in the area of research. Yes, publication-wise we are behind. Patent-wise we are behind. Almost 7.5 decades we have passed since independence. What happened? Why we are not successful? Why we are not able to chase and overtake the developing countries like China and Japan as well? There are reasons. Those reasons were aptly identified by Dr. Kasturi Rangan and brought out his document of National Education Policy 2020. He has identified certain reasons for the failure. I need not hesitate to mention now lack of flexibility in our acts, in our regulations. I'm not telling about act of the country. I'm not telling about regulations of the University Grants Commission alone. I'm telling about the various apex bodies, regulations. There is no flexibility. Most of the time, or some of the time, they are very rigid, very rigid. Rigidity is there. And universities are named as fully autonomous body. But the autonomy is not, it is mainly in the paper, but practically we, vice chancellors, we don't feel that the universities have full autonomy to even introduce courses, even go for a project, even go for a innovation in our campus. Just my Secretary General, who was in long time in UGC, mentioned very clearly, in 2020 NEP only, there is a scope for joint degree can be given both by Indian university and foreign university. But we have been talking about many decades about why not joint degree? Why not to give you an opportunity for a student to get degree from Indian university and foreign university? That kind of autonomy not yet given to us. Fine. More or less, all the time, when we plan for something, when we design for something, we bring the foreign countries' systems, programs, and different plans as well. When we think about foreign countries, and when we appreciate the foreign programs and foreign universities, and when we want to introduce same thing in our country, we should not forget about various variables, various problems we encounter. For an example, there is a world ranking, there is a NAC ranking, there is an Indian ranking. Fine. All this you are doing, keeping in mind the foreign university variables and the Indian university variables are the same. It's not the case. Ours is a country gives top priority for social justice. We have a reservation in students' admission. We have a reservation in appointment of a faculty. We have a reservation in giving promotion for the faculty. These things are not there in the Western countries, in the universities of even developed countries and developing countries. Instead, in spite of all these hurdles, in spite of all this rigidity, we are able to stand well and we are able to provide good service to the human being. We have to appreciate our system. We have to appreciate our higher education system as well. I am happy after going through all these difficulties, Dr. Kasturi Rangan brought out many new things which can be implementable, which can be reachable both to the students and the faculty, which can be very well taken care all the stakeholders of higher education as well. As an example, setting up of a credit bank for the students and the institutions. Definitely, it will encourage the academic achievers of the students and faculty to work with the real spirit and further motivation as well. Followed by multiple exit and entry of mechanism facilities to the students to have flexibility and continuing their education at any point of time. Likewise, making all the higher education institutions as research focused and multidisciplinary, which will increase cross enrollment ratio and it will definitely boost our research outputs. Moreover, allowing 100 foreign universities to establish their campuses in India, which will enhance the healthy academic competition and chance for enriching the quality of research as well. Finally, it's really a good news. Whatever I told about our achievement, we were able to do it within 0.4% on GDP investment in higher education, especially in research. But now we have been an opportunity of getting 6% of CDP for improving and encouraging our higher education system as well. So these are all the various, favorable things we are able to see. But finally, my dear friends, the question of implementation. There are challenges for all the vice chancellors, not only vice chancellor, for all the stakeholders to implement the provisions of the national education policy with the real spirit and vibration. For which we have to go to AICTE, we have to go to NAC also. What I mean, as against the changing environment, definitely Dr. Kasturi Rangan brought out things with a lot of changes. The changes has to be welcomed. The changes has to be accommodated by the agencies like AICTE and NAC. I would like to go to one example and wind up my speech. Take it for granted, faculty-student ratio. Now, both the agencies advocate 1:15. Then come to cadre ratio, 1:2:6. Now, when we think about innovation, introducing innovative programs, getting people to a level of a professor, as per the UGC guidelines, he or she must be a PhD holder and should have 15 years of academic and research experience alone will be nominated or appointed as a professor. Yes, how can you get for the traditional subject? You can get sufficient number of professors, sufficient number of associate professors. There are some unitary universities, there are some unique universities which have been promoted with the intention of going for sector focusing employment universities, how they can fill up the vacancy of professor and associate professor, how they can fill up the cadre ratio, and how they can appoint a faculty with a PhD to maintain the ratio of 1:15. Unless the university follows these kind of ratios and faculty position, definitely these universities will not be given grading. They cannot compete with the other universities. They cannot take the ranking locally and globally as well. That's why it's my request to the affected bodies of AICTE and NAC. Hopefully the panelists will give suitable reply for the issue what I am raising, and see that there must be some flexibility, there must be some concession, and there should not be much restriction when the universities think about introducing novel things, introducing job-oriented, introducing globally needed quality in the research and other areas. With these few words of my observation, now I would like to request Dr. Neeraj Saxena, the advisor AICTU, please come and give your address, sir.
I should be able to. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes,
Very well,
sir.
sir. It is visible, sir.
Okay. So the persons of eminence, erudition, and excellence, my greetings to all of you. I'm very happy and delighted to be part of this meet, which is being organized by the Association of Indian Universities and Sri Sri University, Qatar. I must also thank both these entities, AIU and Sri Sri University, for giving us this chance to be part of this event. I'll share some of my thoughts, some AICTE initiatives, and some of my own perspectives on higher education, which flows out of my experiences of doing technology forecasting and having worked in the area of higher technical education. So the world we live in, we survive because of the two gases, oxygen and the carbon dioxide. We exist because of these two. And there are analogs for the socio-economic world, knowledge and resources. There's an exchange of these two, and we survive and we live. There is a quest for living. And knowledge itself is a resource, while the resources have knowledge embedded in it. So there is a continuous exchange that goes on. The knowledge which gets converted into knowledge, and we call it as research. Resources converted into knowledge, and that we hail as invention. Resources getting converted into resources, production. Knowledge into resources, and that's innovation. So you can see invention and innovation opposite. And universities and academic institutions are supposed to take care of all these exchanges which happen. And all through the human history, the quest of the academic institutions was to convert resources into knowledge, or knowledge into knowledge, and we had universities and academic institutions taking care of research and invention. Resources creation was in the domain of the industries, and gradually we find skills tilting in favor of innovation and academic institutions also getting into this game. And this has started challenging the education system, the students, the teachers, pedagogy, curriculum, and examinations. Everything is getting impacted. So you have research, invention, innovation, and production. That's the continuum. And we see the academics getting into innovations. That's a buzzword. We expect our institutions to innovate. Now, innovation is something which requires sanction of the market. And are really academic institutions meant for that? And if you resolve this innovation, you find that there is a stage, it is ideation, then incubation and innovation. So that's the S curve. And since innovation happens or requires a market sanction, the question is whether institutions can really innovate. So research, ideation, and incubation. You can see research, the 3 dots means it can continue, ideation can continue, incubation is where we need some intervention right in the academic institutions so that the ideas ultimately find some use either in the industry or the society. I'll come back to AICTE. We have, since we regulate the technical education, we have certain programs, some initiatives. I think everybody knows about these. One can always go to our website and find how we are addressing the quality. There are different schemes that we operate, and they have been there for quite some time. And these are on the research front, research promotion scheme, eShodh Sindhu, grants for conferences, and this, everybody can find this. Now, some on the innovation space, innovation support, we have hackathons, IICs, ARIA ranking. These are some of the initiatives by the Ministry's Innovation Cell that we have. But we know the problem in the technical education, and we have launched this scheme. And I'm happy to share at this forum. This is an Idea Lab scheme, and IDEA is an acronym for Idea Development, Evaluation, and Application. So this is a laboratory meant for everybody in the campus and outside the campus. And we are going to support for ideation, idea to prototype development. These are going to be 24/7 laboratories to be managed by the students, not the faculty. And our member secretary says that there should be no lock put on this. Basically, we want to encourage students for application of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, what they learn in the theory to apply. Idea is also to train the students on 21st century skills, not just the students, but the faculty as well, because there is a huge gap. Estimated project cost we have worked out at 1.1 crore, and AICTE will take care of 50% of this, and rest of the money is expected from industry and institution. And these labs are going to be part of a larger national network, which we are going to call as Idea Lab Network. unlike the funding that we give to for infrastructure development or research, we give and we forget. We are putting in this network to ensure that everybody is there in the network and we are able to monitor them. So it's going to be completely monitored, and the labs will not be there just for 2 years, but for longer duration, 4 to 5. And the idea is to change the culture in the institution where the lab is hosted, so that students, faculty, not only from from that institution, but from the neighborhood and even the schools and the small scale industries walk in and make use of these facilities. We have started, we have rolled out the scheme, we have got about 200 proposals, we are looking at them. And then we would like to see that all institutions in the AICT network have at least one Idea Lab. That's the way we envision. And we are going to insist that all the activities in these Idea Labs are going to be aligned with Atmanirbhar Bharat. And this was our motivation. Our Prime Minister said our experiments should be the guiding principle of new age learning: engage, explore, experience, express, and excel. That is, students should engage in activities, events, projects according to their interests. And Idea Labs that we are going to set up are exactly going to do this. There will be activities and events. The focus will be on activities and events. So this was a recent initiative we took, and we would like to see it proliferate across the country. And this is managed by the Institutional Development Cell, which I am taking care of in AICTE. These are the things or the initiatives that we have taken. More details are always accessible from the website, but I would like to spend something which has been there on my mind for a long time. And this morning, I finished a blog, Preparing Universities to Brace for COVID Moment. I thought I will just share it with you, quickly read it. And there is a second one which is moving towards education without examinations. If time permits, I will come on that also. So I'll just quickly go through this, what I finished before starting of this meet. And this title that you find, COVID Moment, is actually, it gets inspiration from Kodak Moment, Kodak, that photographer, which was Kodak Moment was used to describe an occasion suitable for memorializing with a photograph. There was a time in history where uttering the phrase Kodak Moment evoked an emotional sense of nostalgia. The Kodak Moment, ironically, also represents that short time and also game-changing when executives fail to realize how consumers are changing and how markets will transform and head in new directions without them. Yes, Kodak, the giant of analog photography, fell to digital transformation that ironically grew in its own backyard. Having gobbled up Kodak and many more Kodak moments in its ascendancy, digital transformation has taken over the world, touching almost every sphere of human lives, and the march continues, amplified now by the artificial intelligence. In its most basic sense, digital transformation reflects the evolution of models, processes, and supporting systems to democratization and also optimizing how organizations work. Anything that gets expressed in zeros and ones gets democratized, and education has to follow that path. That the academic cycles have survived the COVID-19 global pandemic clearly points out deep ingress of digitalization or information technology in the education sector, now ripe for a COVID moment. Just hold on for a few minutes. I'll explain that COVID, what does it mean for the education sector? A bit of retrospection. Our education systems have persisted with transactions in knowledge at their core. And more specifically, the universities have existed performing the role of repositories and generators of knowledge. The teachers have been there as transmitters of knowledge to equip graduates with knowledge and values, who in turn should create value out of the resources and knowledge around. Besides cohesive and tolerant communities, and not to forget training more of their likes, the teachers, to perpetuate the system. As intellectual, teachers offer rational and timely criticism in areas of public policy, and certifying the learners as holders of certain degree of knowledge by offering standardized and approximate courses of knowledge has been another career building or influencing role of the universities. The university has sourced the human resources needed in the industrial society for over last 2 centuries as a teacher-centered dispensation. To serve the growing demand for higher education, universities created their continuing education wings, and in order to further increase the access, distance education emerged to reach the learners left out of the conventional education system, and also those wanting to move upwards in their workplaces. With improvement and advancements in communication technology, tape recorders, video players, television, they supplemented the learning material provided by the distance universities. The emphasis was on pushing the material, closing the distance, and empowering the learners. But the open distance learning and the conventional education remain two. They are still different. Luckily, the internet has happened, and distance has started liquidating, with now learner and knowledge just a touch apart. Unfortunately, we still have conventional, open distance and online education as separate modes and regulated differently, even though the knowledge imparted through them is the same. Least though it stands by the number of hours to be dedicated by a learner in different modes. Luckily, COVID-19 pandemic pushed the entire system to go online, creating a historic opportunity for integration of conventional, open, virtual, internet-based, and distance education. If you take the first letters, it becomes COVID. So it's a COVID moment. And the pandemic has taught us that academic attainments can be insulated from the mode, and there can be just universities shorn of objectives, giving the autonomous learner an option not only to choose the mode, but also the subjects and also the medium. A convergence of what our Prime Minister foresees as virtual universities. So we are going to step into the era of virtual universities, and this may be the last decade when we have conventionals around. With knowledge repositories in their hold, teachers in their fold, and academic records held as a gold, the university has been a knowledge superpower to a learner who could learn only what the university had to offer and what its teacher could teach. Further, it examined the students in what its teacher knew and not in anything beyond. This authority and supremacy has continued until the arrival of internet, but a learner is now aces up with knowledge of humanity before him on a screen fitting into the palm. Yes, the equation is tilting in favor of a hyper-connected digital learner. The digital transformation, if it gave a Kodak moment to analog photography, is now poised to give the same to the education sector also. The internet has taken away the role of books completely and begun hurting the teachers too, leaving examination and certification in the hand of universities. But this too could be short-lived as focus and expectation of recruiters is shifting towards skills which are not congruent with degrees. A reason why we see rise of nano degrees or micro credentials or certifications. Interestingly, there are some changes which universities are failing to note and respond to. There is a decline in writing, note-taking, bookmarking, highlighting, sketching, doodling, map making, creation of mnemonics, etc. All suggestive of reducing need to commit information to memory and outsourcing memorization to machines. And even before the predicted obsolescence of university sets in, there is an opportunity for them to postpone it by gearing up technologically on content, making it multilingual, delivery, making it immersive, assessment using artificial intelligence to suggest few. Universities should also grow and prepare themselves for accepting answers in any language and any format. By format, I mean it could be written, audio, video, animation, 3D model, etc. Universities must grow up. They must embrace open book exams, stop proctored limited hour exams altogether, encourage peer learning and peer evaluation, incentivize teachers for good quality, really good quality questions, and lastly, give up acknowledging academic failures, which are integral part of learning. Universities should not issue certificates which mention that a learner has failed. In fact, the learner doesn't fail, it is the university which fails. Universities must evolve to tell a learner what he or she excels in and not issue a degree that tells what the learner is not good at. It may be argued that online doesn't support practical or experiential learning, but haven't we pushed practicals on the sidelines by laying emphasis on theoretical knowledge and generous marks in practicals? We have pushed them aside. Practicals are no longer at the center of our education system. The theory is at the center stage, and this needs to be reversed. Peter Diamandis, the founder of Singularity Universities, he says, as education becomes dematerialized, demonetized, and democratized, every man, woman, and child on the planet will be able to reap the benefit of knowledge. We are rapidly heading towards a world of education abundance. Should then, in the era of education abundance, the universities not universalize higher education through online courses or virtual courses rather than admit learners selectively? Integration of all modes into virtual and position virtual as a mainstream as against conventional. This should dim the din on enrollment and increase focus on gross empowerment for access to anyone, anytime, anywhere, and also in any language. With digital learners there now having free access to knowledge, it befits universities to not just teach for enhancing knowledge and examine learners on it, but also on abilities and skills. So knowledge, abilities, and skill to turn out well-rounded graduates. Universities need to get ready for the COVID moment, integrate all modes, than to live and face a Kodak moment, which saw the demise or the fall of the analog photograph. I stop here. There's another issue I wanted to touch, but I think it will be unfair on my part to encroach in the time for the next speaker. If there is time, I will come back on the second thing I wanted to flag, moving towards education without examinations. I stop here for time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj Saxena. Really, you have given a very impressive speech, especially on idea of lab network. It is very popular, and we Vice Chancellors give much importance to implement and make use of the facility as well. As you rightly observed, by which we can train the students for 21st century skill development as well. More or less, I'm happy this facility can be used by nearby schools ultimately society is going to be get benefit out of it. And most of your presentation centered with digitalization and its role is being played during the COVID-19. And you started telling about how the examination, education without examination, even during a speech, I have seen some questions that came in the chat. How what way Dr. Saxena is telling we can go for education without examination. Hopefully during the question hour session, they will put the same question to you, sir. Yeah. So we need your detailed remark on that. With these words of thanks and observation, we invite Dr. Jagannath Patel, the advisor, NAC. Please give your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson of the session, Dr. Thiruvasagam, sir. Let me begin my presentation and a brief talk, conveying my greetings to the dignitaries who inaugurated this conference, beginning from Her Excellency Governor of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, Anandiben Patel ji, the Chancellor and President of the University, Rajita Kulkarni ji, the President of AIU, Dr. Tej Pratap, a very dynamic Secretary General of the AIU, who happened to be our colleague at UGC, Dr. Pankaj Mittal ji, the entire team of AIU, Dr. Ramadevi Pani, Vijendra Kumar, and other colleagues, and also the host team of the Sri Sri University. Thank you for making this wonderful arrangement, and also thinking of inviting NAC for this important session, which gives us opportunity to interact with the vice chancellors and leaders of the university systems in the country, and also my fellow panelist from AICT, Dr. Neeraj Saxena ji. Greetings and pranam. I would like to focus on the topic and the NAC's some key initiatives, and I have prepared myself to get restricted to only 15 minutes, which is the time allotted for this presentation. And also that many of you know NAC. It will be very difficult to find a person or leader of the higher education institution who is not aware of the NAC and its details. But since I am talking, I'll just give you a brief glance of what we have been doing, some facts and figures, and what we are doing in times of COVID, and what is our plan for the in the era of NEP regime. So let me begin this brief presentation. I hope I am audible and my presentation is visible, Mr. Chairperson, sir.
Yeah, very well, sir. Both. It's good, sir. Video and audio is really good. Please, sir, you can proceed, doctor.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As you know, the NAC's processes are always based on global good practices and norms, and we are proud to be one of the leading quality assurance agency in the world with highest number of accreditation exercises to our credit. So far, over 13,000 accreditation exercises have been carried out, which includes multiple cycles covering over 600 universities and 12,000 plus colleges. And we have been facilitating quality and excellence by establishing internal quality assurance cells throughout all accredited institutions. And I did not give more importance to the fact that the various governments and policy-making bodies have been increasingly attaching more and more importance to the accreditation status of the universities and colleges. We have already entered into the mandatory regime by the Government of India, a regulation which came into effect from 2013, which mandates every higher education institution in the country to get accredited if they are eligible. And fact is that so far, not all institutions have come, but many have come. And there are policy and funding linkages for everything. You know that for ODL, now accreditation status of NAC is linked. For autonomy, it is linked. For operations of foreign campuses, collaboration, etc., NAC accreditation has been linked. So there are several linkages with the accreditation. And the new education policy 2020 has only given further impetus to this linkage between accreditation and higher education policy management. So if you go through the recommendations of the new education policy, you will find the word accreditation everywhere. Most of the things of the new policy regime are now linked with the accreditation. So I will talk briefly at the latter part of this presentation. NAAC's international recognition, I am telling this because today's topic also deals with the internationalization as one of the aspects. So I just wanted to share with you that NAAC has a splendid recognition across the globe, within Asia Pacific, internationally. Our collaborations with UNESCO, Commonwealth of Learning, European Commission, and various US bodies also make sure that the students coming out of the Indian universities are properly received, accepted in the global universities. So that is very important because without accreditation, it becomes very challenging for the students for further studies abroad and also for getting placement into various companies. So that is one important thing. That's why our efforts have been recognized. We have this Bengaluru Statement 2016 on next generation quality assurance, wherein we have formulated a vision, a global vision for the quality assurance, a borderless education, how to ensure the quality. That is one aspect, and we have been getting awards for our international efforts, as is evident from the AP1 Quality Award, which we received in Moscow recently. Just to give you a glance of the figures that we have, so far we have accredited to has begun with 3 universities, and in colleges over 8,000 colleges and 47 colleges recently 4th cycle. So total of 13,445 accreditation so far. Just to give you a brief, many of you who have just gone through the process or waiting to go through the process of accreditation, you know that from 2017, NAAC has completely revised its framework. We call it as a paradigm shift in approach and philosophy. From qualitative peer judgments to the data-based quantitative indicator evaluation, in which we have a system-generated evaluation computerized based on the benchmark, which is 70%, and the component of the experts or a peer judgment is now restricted to just about 30%. It varies with genres like university and colleges, but generally about 30%. And it's a automated evaluation model with increased objectivity and transparency. We have significant difference of focus of various criteria in universities, autonomous colleges, affiliated. We have come out with the variants for health science institutions and also teacher education institutions, and soon we will be coming out with different variants for the accreditation. So and one more element that we brought in this process with the insistence of the Niti Aayog and the ministry, that there is a data validation process using external professional agencies, with what we call it as a third-party validation or a data validation and verification process, where reputed agencies which are anonymous have been brought in to verify the data, because the entire process is based on data. So the data is primarily divided into quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics, and I can show you in the next slides in this data. And third-party validation, I explained you, which we call as DVV partners. They undertake this evaluation. It means that NAAC, its officers or its peers play no role in the verification of the data that universities and colleges submit. It is 100% ICT based process. Not a single piece of paper has to be sent physically by post in this entire process. Everything, right from the application to the fees to the evaluation to the result, everything is ICT based. And the initial form, what we call it as IIQA, is just merely information of the or profile of the university or college to ascertain the eligibility of the institutions. We have gone to the extent that the peer team selection is also completely computerized. It means no officer or authority of NAAC decides which team or which expert is invited as expert for a particular university or college. We have a database of over 3,000 experts which are trained, and system automatically selects based on the profile of the university and availability of peers, which is mapped in the system and the assessors portal. The panels for the visits are automatically generated, and the team is formed. This is one of the biggest step towards the transparency and objectivity, which was insisted by the Office of the Honorable Prime Minister and the Ministry of HRD and Niti Aayog, and they have regularly applauded NAAC for its efforts to maintain this level of transparency and objectivity in the recent times. I did not go into the details of the 7 criteria and the outline of the quality indicator framework that many of you know. This is just a brief of the description, like 7 criteria, 34 key indicators, and further 36 qualitative metrics to be judged by the experts, and about 79 metrics for the universities which are completely data based. And this is the table which will give you details of the weightages, how they differ from the universities, autonomous colleges, and affiliated. You can see that there is a more focus on research in the university with weightage of 250, whereas it goes down to the undergraduate colleges just to 110. So I can again skip and fast forward through this. This is an example of the benchmarking. Many of the stakeholders, particularly vice chancellors, professors, or principals, have this query how the marking is done. So this is how the scheme of marking has been developed. We have developed benchmark values for each of the quantitative metrics, which was based on the data that we possessed of over 6,000 institutions and pilot study, surveys, and expert committee meetings. So there is a benchmark developed. Rather, 5 benchmark values for each of the metric have been developed based on these pilot studies. And if you reach the highest level, after verification of the data, the system automatically allots you the highest marks, that is 4. If there is a problem, if you are at lower level, then it will allot you 3, 2, 1, or 0. So this is how the benchmarking system. This is also a very unique system. I can take pride because I was the convener of designing this framework. That NAAC's framework is unique globally in terms of quality assurance framework. Such level of precision has been maintained with no human interference at all in this process. So I have explained you this, what are the quantitative metrics. These are benchmark statements evaluated by peers based on a description, data, and site visits. And qualitative metrics are quantitative metrics are numbers of specific activities, output, achievements supported with documentary evidences. And this is evaluated by DVB partners through ICT interface anonymously. It means you cannot write them email, you cannot call them, you cannot meet them, but you raise the issues on the portal and they are resolved. So this is how the entire thing has been prepared. The grading, how it happens, as I would let you know, is that we have again introduced one unique concept during this cycle, that is using the student feedback, student satisfaction survey as the key component, one of the component of the accreditation process. So we have this input from the qualitative metrics, that is when the experts visit the university or college, they allot some score. They are not aware of the system generated score, that is what is the quantitative evaluation that is taken through the DVB verification process. So they are not aware. They are also not aware of the student satisfaction survey, which ranges from 3 to 5%. So student satisfaction survey is again parallelly generated. So these 3 components, quantitative evaluation, qualitative evaluation, and the student feedback, their evaluation, these 3 components are merged by a system together, and the system generates the grade, which is only overseen, overseen and approved by the standing committee of the NAAC. So there is no interference expected in this entire process. That is how this process is designed. You are aware about the grading system, so I won't explain this. Peer team report, the statistical analysis of the quantitative metrics that is given as the outcome. So it gives you a very clear picture out of 100 metrics, quantitative metrics, where is the institution is doing well, where it is not doing so well. So that can give you a clue for the next 5 years to improve or focus certain areas. So this is very important, I believe. But many times people do not look at these things. They just focus on the cumulative outcome. What is CGPA, whether it is 3.26 or 3.51 or 3.01 something. They don't get into this aspect. According to me, this analysis of each metric is very important for all stakeholders of the higher education institute. What is our response to the COVID? COVID has challenged us in many ways, and of course, our system has responded in a very resilient manner, and we are coming out of that. But NAAC has taken note of the impact on the system, and we have extended all the application deadlines. In many cases, it has been extended indefinitely, saying that as and when the situation becomes normal in the state, your academic year begins. After that, within 3 months, you can submit. So accordingly, accreditation status has been also extended, and we have used this time to conduct hundreds of webinars, reaching out to large number of institutions in the country for purpose of sensitizing as well as capacity building. Again, very important point, recently we have decided that because there was an impact on the academic year 1920 on many institutions, the academic year was not completed in time. There were exams which could not take place, results not being declared. So we have decided that the academic year 2020 will be extended for the purpose of data to be considered for assessment till December 20. So that gives you a larger window for the completion of various data points and submit it to the NAAC. Again, I have spoken about the extension of the validity period, and this same logic will be applied when you will be submitting data for your assessment, because in NAAC format now 5 years data is required. So there will be issues about 1920 data and 2021 data. So similar flexible approach will be taken while accepting the data for the verification for the accreditation. So coming towards the last two points of these slides, I just wanted to say that this whole process of NAAC's revised framework was intended for few things, and some of these things I'll highlight. One was to reduce the subjectivity to the variance in the peer team assessment. There were concerns that different peer teams would assess an institution differently depending on their background or their experience. So this has been substantially reduced in the revised process. We also, by introducing quantitative metrics closer to the rankings, we wanted also to inculcate competitive spirit by providing this quantitative benchmark. Again, because this entire process is data based, we hope that this would improve the data management practices in institutions and increase the use of ICT in teaching and learning, and also integration of the stakeholders' involvement and feedback for quality improvements, like student satisfaction surveys, alumni engagement, employer engagement, and so on. This also focuses on the outcomes-based education, as has been UGC's effort also. We want to supplement that effort by ensuring that there is outcomes-based education. So course outcomes, program outcomes, all those things have been emphasized in this process. Also wanted to encourage the culture of innovation and startup on the campus. Therefore, we have introduced a new key indicator, which is called innovation ecosystem in this new framework. While moving with the technology and innovation, we didn't want to reduce or dilute our emphasis on the values and ethics. That is why criteria 7 talks about institution values and best practices, creating quality culture, promoting gender sensitivity on the campuses, and incentivizing the inclusive practices such as reservation, differently abled, Divyang friendly campuses, etc., etc. And also to encourage students to participate in national initiatives like Swachh Bharat, AIDS awareness, gender issues, and so on. So I can skip some of these things as they are available to you. I wanted to stick to time. So, and coming to the last slide, this is my last slide. talking about the new education policy. Many of you are aware that NAC itself was conceived and implemented on the basis of the new education policy or national education policy of 1986 and plan of action in 1992. It came into existence in 1994. Now we have completed 25 years of the pioneering effort to launch internal quality assurance in India, and this journey has been satisfying. This journey has been a journey which has made many things possible in the higher education system. While we are trying to bring in several good practices, new initiative in the higher education system in the country, we ourselves are learning from the institutions, some good institutions. That's why we are promoting best practices. We are also learning from the international global good practices, trying to rope into whatever best thing that we can collaborate and benchmark and offer it for the improvement of our system. That's why this new paradigm of quality with revised accreditation framework has been implemented. And I'm personally very happy to see that NEP 2020 has taken this quality movement to a very high level. It has recommended a multiple accreditation regime. We began with just a couple of accreditation bodies like NAC, NBA, and maybe we have a agricultural accreditation body also. But mostly in terms of institutional accreditation, NAC is the sole agency for the huge country that we have. And now the work done by NAC has been recognized, and it is now bearing fruit. And NEP has recommended that there will be now multiple accreditation agencies. There will be a National Accreditation Council, NAC, which will oversee the growth of this accreditation regime, new accreditation regime with the ecosystem of multiple accreditation agencies. And as you can see, accreditation would be a backbone of various new systems. New regulatory architecture of the higher education has given importance to accreditation. Just to give an example of that, status of upgradation, because the NEP wants all colleges to soon become autonomous, and then autonomous colleges to become the degree granting institutions and further universities. This entire process is to be evaluated by the accreditation. Autonomy is again further linked with the accreditation. Funding, open and distance learning education enabling is through the accreditation. For the private higher education institutions, accreditation will play a major role in determining the benchmark for fees. Even internationalization is going to be linked with the accreditation. So accreditation is going to be a very important parameter along with all other parameters in this regime. So therefore, NAC has also initiated a process. Professor Sharma ji, our director NAC, has constituted a committee which will prepare a framework, a new framework of NAC, which will be based on the expectations in the new education policy. And I am happy to be the chairperson or the coordinator of that particular committee, which has already begun its exercise for framing the new accreditation based on NEP. And I take this opportunity to request Honorable Vice Chancellors and all the leaders of higher education systems to give your feedback to NAC on what you expect from the NAC's accreditation framework in light of the new education policy. What type of changes are desirable in this framework? We would be definitely taking note of those feedback. Of course, as and when our draft framework will be ready, it will be put on the website. But this is a time to take open feedback from all of you in writing. You can write to Director NAC, or you can write to me, or even Chairman of NAC, and write your feedback. We will try to accommodate as many things as possible in the new framework that we are aiming to launch by July 2021. Towards the closings, as a closing statement, I wanted to say, taking cue from the comments by the chairperson of the session, Professor Thiruvasagan, and I do agree with him that there has been instances of over-regulation in the country, which is reflected in many policy reports. So we hope that with the NEP, this new era would become an era of enablers rather than regulators. And I believe that era of enablers only can assure the dream of our policymakers to make India the Vishwa Guru. So that is what, and just going back to just to remind ourselves this quote I have taken from this beautifully designed IKS calendar, which is a quote from Mark Twain, who says, "India is the cradle of the human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, and the grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most constructive materials in the history of man are treasured up in India only." So we, the people engaged in the higher education, have the responsibility perhaps to turn this dream into reality for all of us. So I take a pause here and look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Dr. Jagannath Patel, you have given a very, very, very interesting and impressive, thought-provoking presentation, for which on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to you. And especially, you have opened a floor or question, before which I would like to register my appreciation to you. You have a plan of, as a chairman of the preparation of NEE framework as against to the national education policy, you are inviting feedback from the Vice Chancellors. Really, really, it is very, very appreciable. And we Vice Chancellors, we have been waiting for such opportunity as well. And I will appreciate the chairman of the particular new framework. Please, can you prepare a format and send to us on various level and various criterion wise? We can give our comments in an appropriate way. That will be much useful for us. As you said, enable us to come along with the NAC and increase the quality of education as well. And whatever you told about the action being taken to face the COVID-19, it is also gives strength to all the Vice Chancellors. Okay, because I want to make more comments and appreciation. Due to time is the limiting factor, I don't want to take much time. Now I am inviting participating Vice Chancellors. Please come out with the questions, and you can put the questions with both the panelists. Please, sir.
Hello, sir. Can I speak?
Please, sir.
I am Mahendra Reddy from Hyderabad. Am I audible?
Very much audible, sir.
Question is to Professor Saxena. Can you elaborate, sir, Professor Saxena, can you elaborate on AICTE labs and what we should do to set up such labs in our campuses to promote entrepreneurship and innovation? Does the AICTE support such labs if they are located in private universities? Question to Professor Jagannath Patil. It was an excellent presentation. How are the scores decided? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Are there any benchmarks? Are these benchmarks known? So how do we know whether I'm going to get 3 or 2 or 4? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Neeraj.
Yes. Yes. This concept of idea labs that we have mooted is a very recent one, but the idea itself is not very new. We have had Atal Tinkering Labs in our schools and MIT Fab Lab in some institutions in India. Now we have tried to kind of Indianize it, align it with our own needs, make for the Atmanirbhar Bharat that we have been talking about. We have just started. We have a handful of proposals now. And the idea is to create an atmosphere, a culture in the institution where the students don't come to mug up and write all that in the answer sheets, get a degree and move out. The 21st century wants people to be problem solvers, work in collaboration, work in teams, lateral thinkers, creative thinkers, design thinking, all these are the attributes which are required in the graduates of 21st century. It makes no sense to examine their memorizing capability. In fact, I expand EXAM as examining Xeroxing ability of mind. Examining Xeroxing ability of mind. Our questions are nothing more than that. Instead, we need to move on for task TASK, testing aptitude or abilities, skills and knowledge. So if 21st century skills, we need to examine them for not only just affective domain, but psychomotor domain. And it has to be a complete one. It cannot be just knowledge, which we are currently doing. Towards that, these idea labs are being set up. This is a pilot. We'll open it up and we'll not just restrict, we'll just firm up this idea and we will admit later on institutions who are ready to come out on their own and set up their idea lab. And we will be happy to provide oversight and monitoring. So thus we will have a network of idea labs all across the country. And here the idea behind the idea labs is not to make students innovators. They are students. They have come here to learn something. We want to open up their minds, make them creative people, and not just mug up things and move on. So that's a difference. And it is an experiment in itself. And unlike other schemes where it is unidirectional, we will be requesting all the heads of institutions in these idea labs are. We are calling them as chief mentors. We'll be requesting periodically to tell us how idea labs can change the education system. We want them to come back and tell what they did with the idea lab. It is not just a lab for the sake of it. It is about bringing other departments, the faculties, the industries around to walk in and make use of it. And it is about doing things with hand. We are forgetting, the generation is forgetting. So we want to bring focus on that and do away with rote learning, which is not going to help us. Yes, we are going to open it up for, even in AICTE network, we have private colleges. So we are open for them. Gradually, we will open it up for universities also. But this is just the beginning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saxena. Can I go to Dr. Jagannath Patil, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mahendra Reddy ji, for your question. I think I partly explained in my presentation how the benchmarks have been prepared. We have used the accreditation data that we have. At that time, we had about 6,000 institutions data. So that data we have used and prepared some draft benchmarks, piloted it across the country with hundreds of institutions. And on the each level, the best in class performance has been identified, and that value has been given 4 marks for each of the metrics. So best in class performance has been identified and given 4, and accordingly in a descending order, the 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0 value is given. So this is a standard benchmarking method we have adopted. We actually wanted it to be public. There is nothing wrong. We thought that the benchmark values can be public. So people, for example, what is the ideal ratio of the number of PhDs in a university? How many faculties could be PhD? So that could be public, we thought. And but somehow during the process, the authorities felt that taking some habits that are seen here and there to just achieve what is told. Compliance mentality, it is called in the in parlance of the quality assurance or the regulatory bodies. So whatever is required, people will show it to show without doing perhaps nothing. So to avoid that kind of thing from some people, they said that let the benchmarks be confidential As of now, they are confidential, but I don't think that they are confidential, but because when you know Indian Institute of Science is accredited, Delhi University is accredited, so many universities are accredited, and we have mandated them to put their data in public domain. So my simple feedback to those who are looking for benchmarks is follow the best in class and you can go there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jainath Patel. Now, I think Vice Chancellor B.B. Sharma wants to raise some question. Yes, Professor Sharma.
Just a very quick one, sir. First of all, NAC is doing a great job and we all are highly appreciative of it. But the concern I have, Dr. Patil, that for every single matrix, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, the minute we go for grading on 4 points, you go from 4 to 3, you lose 25% straight away. Go from 3 to 2, you lose another 25%. So this whole idea of benchmarking could have been possible when you go to the total score of an institution based on quantitative and qualitative. I would have been most happy. But the minute you start marking actually on a scale of 4 for every single matrix, I think the justice cannot be done, especially that we are a data-driven process. We are a process where every single mark count, and I think a lot of introspection in this respect is required. This is my humble submission. After all, NAC will have its own wisdom in doing its assessment, but I think this is one concern which I thought I was that I would have been most happy that you award marks out of 100 or whatever on every single matrix, go at the end, do the total, and then award the grade on the basis of a 4-point scale. One would have been most happy. But in this process, some may gain, some may lose. Those who gain, of course, would dance. Those who lose will cry, and they will think what is happening. This is my humble submission. Honorable Chairman, sir, thank you so much for allowing me to raise this concern, although I'll be chairing next session. But I thought let me flag this issue right now that Dr. Patil is in front of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice question.
Sir,
Yes,
we
Doctor.
can get the feedback without any comment because it is a useful suggestion that I am sure the committee which will look into the revision of the framework would, I would encourage, sir, and request you to put it in writing, in a very constructive way, and the committee can consider that suggestion.
Thank you. Questions? Any other question from Vice Chancellors?
I'm Professor Kumar from
Yeah, may I
Bhubaneswar.
speak?
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, my question is to Dr. Jagannath Patil. I have been associated with this peer team as a peer team reviewer for many years now, and I am the witness how our NAC accreditation system has greatly improved. No doubt. Say if we look 10 years back, there is a lot of improvement, a lot of perfection has come, but then there is still a lot to do. My specific question is that in view of this pandemic and particularly NEP 2020, how much weightage in terms of increase in weightage do you see as a technology enabler, an institution which has applied for accreditation? How much increase will be there in the weightage on technology, institution technology as an enabler? Will weightage increase significantly or will remain the same as it used to be? This is to Dr. Patil. Hello.
Yeah, please, sir.
Dr. Patil, my question is to Dr. Patil. How much increase do we see in the weightage on technology now in the new system, the amended system of NAC?
Dr. Patel, please.
Perhaps she is not connected.
Yeah, now he is connected. Patel, please already unmute and speak. Dr. Patel? Dr. Patel?
Patil, are you able to hear?
Yeah, I'm hearing, ma'am.
Okay.
Can you?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think.
Could I repeat the question?
No, I think you are asking what is the increase of weight of technology in the system, right?
Yeah, weightage. How much weightage will be increased now in the new system, changing system, the change system?
Actually, responding in two ways. First of all, the entire process is technology enabled. That whole part is technology enabled, and you will find number of metrics which put emphasis on technology for in terms of infrastructure, the availability of the right from the availability of the bandwidth, the computing systems, and then library automation. There are so many metrics which deal with the technology innovation. I can't just count and tell you, but I think there is a very increased emphasis on these new things.
Okay, thank you very much. Time is very limited. We have to go for a next session. It will start by 1:30. Any more questions? Any one or two questions we can accommodate, Vice Chancellors.
May I make a couple of humble remarks? I'm Professor Kumar from Bhubaneswar.
Please, sir.
One statement about, yes, certainly we need some sweeping changes, and NEP 2020 addressed a number of very relevant issues. But let's not use the word demonetization. It is not applicable. Demonetization is not applicable in academics in that sense. The next thing is about students also fail. It's not that only institutes fail. While institutes are successful in passing a number of students, a fraction of students may fail too. So that is not, according to me, that's not correct. Now regarding removing the examinations, well, it takes time. So when our learning, as all of us are aware, examinations are for assessing the learning, like our NAAC assessing the performance of institutions. Examination is for assessing the learning by a student in a common framework of education offered by an institution, teaching offered by an institution to the students. So learning fails, we have ailments. Learning is failing in some institutions, and teaching is also failing in some institutions. And the examinations have become very, testing for memory. They test memory, memorization capacity of a student than the skills of a student. So removing these examinations at this juncture is not a right thing. So ultimately, we don't need examinations once we are confident about the education, the success of education in our institutions. I think we are far away from reaching that stage, and removing examinations just like that is not a right thing to do, where the teaching standards are not so good and there are related ailments in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Thanks for your remarks about the remarks. It's okay. Anything to be answered, Dr. Patel? Do you want to answer anything? Dr. Patel?
No, actually, he didn't make any remark about what I said.
Okay,
so that's fine.
The last question from any of
Professor, I'm Satyanarayana from C.V. Raman Global University, Odisha, here, Bhubaneswar. Can I add a question?
Please, sir.
Yeah. I would like to first thank both Dr. Neeraj Saxena and Professor Jagannath Patil for their wonderful presentation. It's very exciting to hear their views, and especially our compliance agencies are looking at it. My question to both of them is, national education policy clearly looks at two issues, namely vocational education streamlined and linked along with lifelong learning, as is the requirement across the globe. And all the presentation also with outcome-based education clearly looks at, does our assessment look at ability to inquire, critical thinking, analytical thinking, creative thinking, innovation, entrepreneurship? These are the outcomes that are expected. And that can only happen when this vocational hands-on experiential learning is linked from school to college for understanding fundamentals, from there leading to inquiry, critical thinking, creative thinking, innovation, entrepreneurship. So I did not see both of them mentioned somewhere. How do we seamlessly link this vocational or experiential learning per se, though I think whether the Idea Labs and all of them clearly look at it. So how do we divide this caste or divisions between, say, school or vocational, professional and academic knowledge, and bring knowledge and skill together? any initiatives that are clearly looking at bringing knowledge and skill together for, understanding, inquiry, innovation, and all that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor sir. These are all things to be discussed between us, and hopefully, and people of NAC and AICT may not able to respond.
Very true.
Really a good question you have raised.
Parameters are being fixed. So somewhere, if this is highlighted, it will be easy to bring it on board because faculty are used to the process enabled.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, finally, a question from the chairman to the Dr. Jagannath Patel. I'm happy about your concern, NAC's concern towards COVID-19. You brought out some reforms and you have made some changes as well. As you correctly said, the grading is going to be decided on 3 major aspects of quantitative, qualitative, and the students' feedback, satisfactory students' feedback. So during COVID-19, how the students are being taken care by the university, it's a very big challenge to the university as well. See, all along we have been conducting classes online. And most of the students, they are not able to be accessible due to networking problem. Listening is a problem, teaching is a problem. And again, conducting examinations is a very big problem. But as per the directions, notification given by UGC and AICTE, we Vice Chancellors, we have conducted examinations. To be very honest, the quality-wise, standard-wise, the examinations were not conducted with the pakka perfection. When it's a case, the students may not be happy with the concerned universities about conducting classes, about conducting examinations. When it's a case, when the questions go to the students and ask their feedback during this COVID-19, definitely the justification will not be there. You may not ask detailed questions related to examination. You may ask questions related to OBE, you may ask questions related to ICT. Students are students. What may think, they may take this an opportunity to degrade the university or giving chance for them to decide about or to tell about the university a different aspect as well. Do you have any concern about all these things? Because student satisfactory survey is going to play a major role, Dr. Patel.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I really appreciate your concern on this point, and this particular topic of student satisfaction survey and introducing it and linking it to the accreditation has been one of the hugely discussed issue within NAC and with our stakeholders. And I have remained the strong champion of this, because if many of you are very, you have traveled around the world, and you know that when you go to Europe, no higher education system, management, quality assurance, nothing happens without students' involvement. I just wanted to tell you that quality evaluation panel of each of the country in European Union, along with the professors and the vice chancellors, a student representative is there to evaluate the university or colleges. So there is a very I have done some study, a international research project on this topic, and I have found a very serious and strong correlation between involvement of students in the quality management and the quality of the institutions. I don't want to just give you examples from outside the country. Our study also showed that most of the IITs, IIMs, and best-in-class institutions in the country, they have a very strong component of engaging students in entire things. And I personally come from a very rural area background. I have seen how casually students are taken. And just to quote you from the new education policy document, which talks about the J.S. Verma Committee's observation, which goes on record to say that in India, there are thousands of teacher education institutions which are on paper. It means they don't exist. There is no teaching, there is no learning. Students are at home. Degrees are just granted, distributed. And we have seen it across length and breadth of the country happening in various colleges. So, not taking students seriously, to me, is a serious cause of low quality in Indian higher education. When we take our students with you, we take them seriously.
Hello.
Collaborated with various evidences and studies. So that is eventually reflected in the NAAC's policy and action. And some bottlenecks will be there, connection issues will be there, for teaching it will be there. So obviously for student satisfaction survey also it will be there, but students will be aware if you are taking care of them seriously, diligently, mentoring them properly, nothing to worry. Just wanted to tell you, this is one of the metric. Since we started these revised frameworks, this is one metric which has always received highest marks for the university or college. So students are generally kind to their alma mater, and we have seen that they generally give better marks, sometimes better than what should be, and that is not the case. So far we have not seen, only in very high level institutions where students are highly alert about their rights, active, there you might see some change, but by and large it is helping the idea of making higher education systems student centric rather than teacher centric.
Thank you very much, Dr. Patil. You have given really a good reply for the questions raised by all the Vice Chancellor, including myself. I should thank both Dr. Saxena and Dr. Patel for having presented their views and opinions and the concept and perception of apex bodies of AICTE and NAAC. And I don't want to make any other comments. I would like to thank the organizers of the Sri Sri University AAU for having given us an opportunity to have a open talk session with the Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
As we come to the conclusion of this session, on behalf of AIU and Sri Sri University, I extend my thanks for the engaging discussions, insights, and profound presentations of the thoughts. I'm sure that the discussions must have given more clear pathways to march forward. Before we move on for our lunch, whosoever is willing, we invite you for a 20 minutes guided meditation in the voice of the Gurudev.